morning and welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom, and we are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio this morning. You see the number on the bottom of your screen. You can comment at any time during today's broadcast or after the broadcast if you'd like. The big news, well, there's a couple big stories, and we're going to talk about both of them, luckily. The first being George Santos' seat. It has been taken by a Democrat. Tom Suozzi defeated Mazie Pillop in the special election to replace George Santos. I hope the Santos conversations, well, they've been trickling off a little bit, but I hope this kind of ends all of that. There's a few takeaways. I will say, and the numbers are, Pillop, a 47-year-old Nassau County legislator, earned 46.1% of the votes behind Suozzi's 53.8%. That was with about 93% of the ballots counted. One of the takeaways, I think, from this is the effects of early voting. I know Republicans are typically not the biggest fans of early voting, want to vote in person. We've actually had this conversation with former Congressman Joe Sempolinski on the program in the past. Democrats, on the other hand, have taken advantage, if you want to, of the opportunity for early voting. Now, with the snow that came yesterday, that definitely played in Suozzi's advantage. Now, whether or not that's a difference maker, there's no way to really tell. But when people can't get to the polls, and some people already did, it definitely, and if you're not familiar, early voting skews towards Democrats. Well, CNN put together a takeaway article that they do with topics like this. And they said immigration is a big issue, but is it a game changer? I think this is a little wishful thinking from CNN. They're hoping it's not a game changer because it doesn't reflect well for Democrats in that scenario. But I do think it's going to be a big game changer. This was kind of a fluke type of special election, meaning that Suozzi had already been congressman. There's a lot of different factors here. Santos does not, let's face it, is not going to help at winning as a Republican, is not going to help the Republicans. A lot of people are going to be turned off by that whole story from beginning to end. But the campaign was staked on a series of issues from the beginning: immigration, inflation, Israel, and abortion. We're going to get to the Israel issue in just a moment. Suozzi talked about reproductive rights, but didn't make it a centerpiece of his campaign, which is kind of unique because we know that is what, well, the president is going to run on abortion and probably first and foremost threats to democracy caused by Trump. But I'll continue. Inflation has mostly leveled out, they keep telling us over and over and over again, in hopes that you believe them and never mind what you experience at the grocery store, or let's not even say grocery store, really with any purchase that you make. Never mind that. Never mind what's going on with your bank account right now after you head to the grocery store or get gas. It's all leveled out, so that could never be an issue. Not even immigration, barely an issue. And there is no political or policy space to speak of between the candidates who both fully backed Israel. Understanding this, Pillop and Republicans set about hammering Suozzi over the migrant crisis in New York City, claiming he caused it along with Biden, a line that ultimately didn't quite wash with voters who have long recognized Suozzi as a moderate or centrist. When Pillop suggested he was in league with the progressive squad, Suozzi at the debate was prepared. Quote, "For you to suggest I'm a member of the squad is about as believable as you being a member of George Santos's volleyball team." Okay. Most notably, though, Suozzi and state Democrat leaders didn't repeat their mistakes from 2022. They aggressively countered Pillop's migrant stance and never felt like an issue, which is typically a winner for GOP. We talked about this recently. Democrats are doing attempting to do make immigration a Republican issue, meaning that they're not working with us. They're not giving in to our demands on this, meaning the Republicans, so they don't care about the border. Will that work in not a one-off like this? This is just a kind of an odd election. It's not to take away the fact that the Republican majority is now even more slim than it was before, but it is still nonetheless not maybe a a bellwether, a sign for things to come. We're going to talk more about this. This is not going to be our only topic, but I did want to start with that because it's somewhat breaking news. If you weren't aware, that Suozzi did win in that special election in the third. All right, we're going to take our first break. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio there on Marcus Street in Corning. I'm your host, Frank Acom. You're watching Frankly Speaking. We're talking about Suozzi and his victory over Pilip yesterday in the third. Redemption for top New York Democrats, says CNN. Well, they outspend Pilip by a lot. So if that's, backed by lots of outside cash, it says so in the article. We'll continue. The weather mattered. And this is the point I made at the beginning. It snowed heavily in the tri-state area for the first time in years Tuesday, which made travel tricky. Closed schools. Oh, yeah, did you see New York City? I know I mentioned it yesterday how it looks like COVID took away the snow day because they got a work at home day in New York City, and it went horribly. Their system was not set up right for it, and ultimately it was somewhat of a snow day. So maybe another victory there. But anyway, and otherwise, kind of messed up the normal flow of an election day. Good thing then for Democrats that, unlike many Republicans, enthralled to Trump. Now remember, this is from CNN. Imagine putting that in a news piece. Good thing that for Democrats that, unlike many Republicans, enthralled to Trump, they very much embrace the idea of early voting. And there is something to that, minus that enthrall with Trump. I understand the concerns with early voting. I understand why Republicans don't like it, and you've heard many people say this, elected leaders, officials, that until Republicans somewhat embrace it or start at least using the system to their advantage with early voting, it is always going to be kind of a boost for Democrats. So I've seen many people take up the mantle saying, I'm going to early vote as a Republican, just to show that it can be done, I suppose, maybe the term, but that it's not necessarily detrimental. And in this case, it was beneficial if you early voted. And in this case, of course, it skewed heavily Democrat. Now, we also learned last night the Democrats still have an Israel problem. There stood Suozzi, all smiles, as he prepared to begin his victory speech when he is interrupted by protesters accusing him of aiding and abetting a, quote, genocide by Israel and Gaza. Then it happened again and again. Never mind, his rival was arguably more inclined to support Israel. Well, yeah, she was a member of the Israel Defense Forces before moving to the U.S. after all. But, are you going to go to somebody's concession speech and do this? Or are you going to go to where someone gets the most attention? I think that's kind of an odd thing to say. But this is a signal, if nothing else, to the president and his campaign. They do, unfortunately, have a problem when it comes to support for Israel in the Democrat Party. And it could ultimately affect Joe Biden. And we talked about it in the past, Van Jones saying it, and I wasn't aware of it at the time, that younger people specifically, and should come as no surprise because what we're seeing on college campuses, have this strain of maybe anti-Israel sentiment. So they have taken to calling Joe Biden Genocide Joe. So does that mean Joe and other candidates end up weakening in their stance on Israel or not supporting Israel at all? Time will tell on that. But yes, Democrats do have. And so when you see people say, well, it's just the fringe element in the Democrat Party, it's looking more and more so like that is not the case. That is not the fringe. Continuing, though, this is an important part. Don't take away too much from this, which is interesting because I have a piece from the Washington Examiner. Red dominoes could start to fall with Santos' special election. Yes, this is a bellwether. This is going to prove it all, that Republicans are going to lose. Democrats are just going to sweep in November. He expected that piece. It comes as no surprise. It's by Jack Burley. But red dominoes could start to fall with Santos' special election. But as CNN said, the race was always going to take on national significance because of a slim majority in the House. But Democrats would be wise to remember that Suozzi was a unique and uniquely talented candidate with deep ties across Nassau County, where most of the voters reside. A former mayor, we can go through his whole history. You also have the Santos effect. I don't think you can take away from that how many people maybe supported Santos or would be inclined to support Republicans, but said that was such a disaster that they either didn't get out and vote or either had kind of were a little, what's the word I want to use? Voting shy. They didn't want to vote and get duped again, perhaps. So yes, I think it's obviously a newsworthy story. That's why I started the program with it. But I also don't think it says much for the future, specifically November. It was a special election where you had a man that was congressman at one point running. You had the snowstorm, many things playing into this. But the former president, Donald Trump, did lash out at Mazie Philip, calling for real GOP candidates to face Suozzi in the November election. Former President Trump lashed out at fellow Republican Mazie Philip, claiming she lost Tuesday's special election because she didn't endorse him for president. Trump bashed Philip on social media. I know I'm having a little trouble with her name. It's Philip, I think. Philip. You got to say it kind of quick. On True Social, and asked for a real candidate in the November general election to face off against Suozzi. So yes, there will be another election in November. He said on Truth, Republicans just don't learn, but maybe she was still a Democrat. I have an almost 99% endorsement success rate in primaries and a very good number in the general elections as well. But just watch this very foolish woman, Mazie Melissa Philip, running in a race where she didn't endorse me and tried to straddle the fence when she could have easily won if she understood anything about modern-day politics in America. Give us a real candidate in the district for November. Suozzi, I know him well, can be easily beaten. So if you'd like to weigh in on this, please do. We're going to move away from that. I've got to take another short break. We're going to talk about the impeachment of Mayorkas when we come back. So make sure that you see that number on the bottom of the screen. Make sure you reach out and have your voice heard right here. Leave a voicemail or a text, and we'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. Thank you so much for joining us here on Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Hakem, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. And right now we live on air read a message from a viewer. The Republicans lose another House seat. Yes, and we were just talking about Suozzi. The Democrats would never have let a Democrat get removed from the House, especially if they had the majority, regardless of what he did, until there was a conviction. And I agree with that. If you recall at the time, I'm not a fan of Santos. It was not defending Santos. It was, there hasn't been a conviction. What precedent does this set? That was the problem that I saw in this. And I think to Ken from Horsehead's point, I do agree. I don't think if the shoe was on the other foot, this would be happening. I don't believe the Democrats, they would have just surrounded their candidate, no matter how bad the scandals, surrounded until at least election season. Continuing. If the other side uses early voting, which they do, we should do the same. When will Republicans learn that you don't take a knife to a gunfight? Yeah, that's what the point is with the early voting is right. I know a lot of people don't like it. I myself really much enjoy going to the polling place and going through that and getting the sticker and all that. But we have to learn that they're very good at that. And when they see the numbers coming in with early voting, they can assume that many of those votes are Democrats. And it makes it a little bit easier to understand how to, for lack of a better term, say run the rest of the race. In this scenario, they had to feel pretty good as the snowstorm hit, knowing that they most likely had the advantage, and they did, going in before the snow started hitting. So that's why you had Philip and her campaign going out and trying to drive people to the polls, trying to, I guess there was something I read where some PAC spent money plowing in Republican areas. There's better ways to handle that. So I would say if the Democrats are going to use early voting, Republicans should think as well to maybe start embracing it a little bit. So Mayorkas has become the first cabinet secretary impeached since 1876. That's, not according to specifically Axios, but they're the ones that have the headline. The House on Tuesday voted 214 to 213 to impeach Secretary of Homeland Security Mayorkas over his handling of an influx of migrants across the U.S.-Mexico border. To this point, too, and to what Ken from Horsehead said about how Democrats wouldn't let what happened to Santos happen if he were a Democrat, you wouldn't have had, if the shoe was on the other foot here, again, not to keep using that phrase, if this were someone, let's say in the Trump administration, or the George W. Bush administration, any Republican administration, if this was the Secretary of Homeland Security and Democrats were going to impeach him, you would not have had the three defectors, the three people that on the Republican side that voted against this. That would not have been the case. So wouldn't have necessarily have lost the first go around as it did last week, and the media still running with headlines after last week's embarrassment, playing right in the hands, but that would not have happened. But anyway, we continue. It's the first time since War Secretary William Belknap in 1876 that a cabinet secretary has been impeached, though Mayorkas is all but certain to be acquitted in the Senate. Now, they are going to hold, I think it was February 29th when they come back. I have that here somewhere, where the Senate does put together and get sworn in a jury. But again, I don't think we have any expectation that it will go anywhere in the Senate. The House impeached Mayorkas on 2 counts: willful and systemic refusal to comply with the law, and breach of public trust. Representatives, here we go, this is what I'm referencing. Representatives Ken Buck from Colorado, Tom McClintock from California, and Mike Gallagher from Wisconsin voted with all Democrats against impeachment. That's the same group that did last week as well. No surprise if you look at some of their backgrounds, some retirement, some things where they can show perhaps their true colors. The 22-page article of impeachment accused Mayorkas of failing to comply federal law and court ruling around migrant detention and blames him for a surge in border crossings during the Biden administration. Mayorkas has demonstrated he will remain a threat to national and border security and acted in a manner grossly incompatible with his duties and the rule of law, the measure says. Additionally, Mayorkas is accused of false statements to Congress and obstructing oversight from Congress and the DHS Inspector General. You notice you can make false statements a lot to Congress, and not a lot normally comes from that. Here's House Republicans. Oh, yes, this is it. DHS spokesperson Mia Ehrenberg said in a statement, House Republicans will be remembered by history for trampling on the Constitution for political gain. President Biden saying kind of similar. We'll get to that in just a moment. We will hear a statement from our Congressman, Nick Langworthy. Also, I should mention this comment from a viewer. We have Republicans and Democrats that sell the U.S. down the river. Is Mayorkas's impeachment too little, too late? 3 years in the process. Get real, representatives. Thank you for that. Keep those comments coming in. We've got to take another short break. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. So we're talking about the impeachment of Mayorkas. Democrat Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer's office said that the senators will be sworn in as jurors shortly after the return from a break on February 26th. So they still have to go through the motions, but I don't believe many people have a lot of confidence that it'll go any further than the pomp and circumstance. But if you are just joining us, the House yesterday voted 214 to 213 to impeach Secretary of Homeland Security Mayorkas. President Biden said in a statement, history will not look kindly on House Republicans for their blatant act of unconstitutional partisanship that has targeted an honorable public servant in order to play petty political games. Isn't it interesting how, I don't know, history repeats itself where everything's cyclical, that it's like, why was there never statements like that made during the Trump administration? You know, you think of the impeachments against Trump, it wasn't the history will not look kindly. You know, that's always been a common thing. History will not be on your side. You are not on the right side of history. History will not look kindly on you for this blatant act of unconstitutional partisanship that has targeted an honorable public servant in order to play petty political games, to the point about lying to Congress, etc. Typical statement. It's politics. We understand it. Here's another statement from a viewer. The Democrats would primarily, I think that means should primary, the Dems would primary the 3 representatives that didn't vote with the group. Sorry, just a couple Typos. I understand it's texting. I'm not criticizing the text. Thank you for sending in, Ken. The Dems would primary the 3 representatives that didn't vote with the group. I would agree that they would be social pariahs. It doesn't work that way. I mean, Democrats are historically great. I don't think I'm telling tales out of school here. They're historically great about rallying around each other. Same goes back to the original statement about Santos, if he were a Democrat, would not be out. So in this case, the 3 Republicans that didn't vote for Mayorkas, if they were Democrats and it was a Democrat administration or a Republican administration, yeah, they would primary him. They would be out. Democrats are only allowed to vote against a group when they have enough votes without their vote. Yes, and it will help them with their constituents. So if there's a controversial, because that's why sometimes you've seen members of the squad vote for things that they were so outspoken about. Well, because they rally around the troops. Because they still know at the end of the day that they have to toe the party line. But if they have enough votes and it's not an issue, they can then say, okay, let me vote on it this way so I can go back to my constituents, my base, and tell them. Yeah, it's all a game, and they're very, very good at it. Again, it seems like the Republicans don't want to win. They go along to get along. You know, there's been a theory, and I said this many years ago, but I do believe there is a real valid point sometimes that Republicans don't want to be in power, because then it's the tough decisions you have to make. I think a prime example of that is when Trump became president, and after years of complaining and voting against Obamacare and saying so many things about Obamacare, when push came to shove, Republicans had nothing prepared. They weren't ready to lead. So I do think sometimes when you watch this, you go, do they really want to win? I mean, they want to win re-election, but do they really want to win on some of these issues that they promise voters? Because if they're in the minority, remember, they can always go back to their constituents and say, boy, golly, we tried. It was all I could do. We tried. I voted exactly how you wanted me to, but nothing could be done. So I think that's a good point. The Senate has already, this is another comment from a different viewer, the Senate has already proven that they won't take the impeachment seriously. They passed a $95 billion aid package to secure borders of foreign nations, yet they could care less about ours. Yes, keep those messages coming in. Wow, we got a lot of comments this morning. On a completely unrelated note, it looks like Mayor Eric Adams wants to outlaw 30 and 60-day stay limits for illegals. He and Hochul are both as bad as Mayorkas for the citizens of New York State. Thank you very much. Boy, we had a quick list there. I appreciate it. All right, we do have to take, let me see, how are we doing on time? No, good, I got time. Because I wanted to hear from our Congressman Nick Langworthy on this, because the congressman voted to impeach Mayorkas, obviously, because I mentioned the 3 Republicans that didn't. Here's what the Congressman had to say. Under Secretary Mayorkas, we've seen record-breaking illegal immigration month over month, accounting to more than 8.3 million border crossings. He willfully and systemically refused to comply with federal immigration laws. He violated his oath to this country, and he repeatedly lied to Congress and the American people. Congress has a constitutional duty to hold Mayorkas accountable for his role in creating the border crisis, and that's why I voted to impeach him tonight. Obviously, the statement came out last night, needless to say. So that's from Congressman Nick Langworthy. We always appreciate when we hear from him. Okay, let's get away from this, but feel free to weigh in on it, whether it's about Santos' seat going to a Democrat, Suozzi, or whether it's the impeachment of Mayorkas. We are going to move ahead now to the presidential race, because when we come back, I'm going to take a break so I don't get too far behind. I have been arguably talking about the RFK Jr. Super Bowl ad too much, but I think I was vindicated. And the reason that is, I said yesterday on the program and on Monday that I think it was an effective ad. You know, whatever you think of RFK Jr., whatever you think of his politics, or whatever party you are on, I don't think you can deny it was an effective ad. And then yesterday I brought up the fact that he apologized to his family for it because he had no say ultimately in it, because it was a super PAC. And I said, well, that's interesting. Why is he doing that? Well, why, when his Google searches for his name skyrocketed? I mean, that's what you want if you're running for president. Well, the long knives are out. So it looks like I was vindicated. This was an effective ad. So we're going to talk about that when we come back. I do have to mention this very quickly. I want to mention this because I'm very excited about it. I'm very proud of this. We had, and I think I've mentioned it a few times, we recorded a celebration of Black History Month. And it's going to play on Friday at 10:30 right after the news, right here on Big Fox, of course. And then on Sunday, if you miss the late 10:30 p.m. broadcast, on Sunday at 11 a.m., you'll be able to catch the celebration of Black History Month. We have great guests. We'll be talking to Georgia Verdier, both friends to Frankly Speaking, Georgia Verdier and Michael Joseph. Georgia Verdier has been the president of the Elmira Corning NAACP for over 30 years. And we have Michael Joseph, who is a historian for the Tuskegee Airmen Incorporated. We're going to talk with them. And then we get a very special tour. And if you're not familiar with this place, it's the John W. Jones Museum. We're going to find out about just the legendary man himself. We're going to talk about the museum that's in Elmira, and we're going to get a little tour. So you'll get to see maybe what you've been missing, because I highly recommend that when it opens for the season, that you and your family go down and check out this amazing place. So again, please watch that special, and then let me know what you think on, well, you could text right during the program if you want, or after you've watched. Because if you're not aware, we can take texts and we can take voicemails at that number 24/7, not just during the program. So it's Friday at 10:30 p.m. and then Sunday at 11 a.m. right here on Big Fox. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, please stay with us. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on Big Fox. We've received so many great comments this morning. Thank you so much. Keep them coming in. Here's another one. Very good point about the Republicans not wanting the responsibility or blame. Yes, and I want to make clear when I say that, it's not all Republicans. There's a lot of, I guess what people have come to deem the Rhino type of Republicans, the Paul Ryan that didn't have an answer to Obamacare or whatever the case may be. So I do think there are some that like being in Washington. And there could be an argument that maybe this is on both sides. I don't see it in the Democrat Party. They normally have all their ducks in a row with what they want to get through. But with Republicans, there has always seemed to be this group, the Mavericks, maybe the moderates, the whatever you want to call them, that I think they like just being in the minority and saying, we're fighting hard for you. And no, we didn't get through this, or no, we couldn't stop this, but what could we do? Democrats are in charge. And then, they go again and get reelected and everything's good. But the viewer continues. However, it's time the Republicans stand up for constitutional democracy. I believe there are a lot of Republicans now. I think what I'm speaking of, that wanted to be in the minority, I think that was more of a kind of a pre-Trump mindset. I don't see it as much. We've seen a lot of, yes, there are some like that voted against impeachment. There are some, a lot of times they're on the way out, retiring or not running for re-election, know they're going to get defeated, and that's when they all of a sudden kind of show their true colors, if you will. So I didn't mean to get on that tangent. Elise Stefanik did file a complaint against Attorney General Letitia James over the Trump case, and judge moved ahead with the Fani Willis hearing, but documents not turned over for hearing tomorrow, February 14th. Happy Valentine's Day, Fani Willis. Yes, thank you for that. Viewers are great. You're always great. Thank you. So as I mentioned, I think I've been vindicated. The DNC heightens their attack on RFK Jr. as a spoiler candidate who will help Trump. So that ad must have had more impact and more power than I even thought it did. The Super Bowl ad, the Super PAC paid $7 million for. If you missed it, I'm sure you can find it online, but it was a throwback to JFK. I thought it was really effective. I did. The Democrat Party has ramped up its attack on independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr., marking the first significant attempt by either party to shape voter sentiment around his candidacy. Yeah, I mean, that's what I mean. They've got to be a little scared. They laughed him off. They called him horrible names, anti-vaxxer. Really, it was shocking, if you recall me mentioning it at the time, to see the media go after Kennedy like this. I mean, there'd be a lot of people who would never believe you if 10 years ago you said that, 20 years ago you said that. But yes, the media going after Kennedy. And so they started with that. They figure, well, he'll go away. Not a big deal. And then that ad comes out, and now the DNC, and this is coming from CNN. We're concerned that Donald Trump is disrespecting the Democrat process. It's pretty clear that Trump and his mega donors are propping up RFK Jr. as a stalking horse. Yeah, they're going to try to do everything to discredit him. Mark Gorton, America Values 2024 co-founder, that was a group that helped fund the Super Bowl ad for RFK Jr., said, the only argument the DNC has left is that Biden is not Trump. When RFK Jr. gets on the ballot, the American public will have the ability to choose a candidate who is not Trump, who has integrity, bravery, a proven track record of fighting corporate corruption, and the ability to stand up to the corporate interests that have taken over the Biden administration. Ooh. The American people are waking up, and the DNC's only hope is to prevent them from having a choice. Also, Mediaite reports that RFK Jr. and his presidential campaign is facing a staff exodus because it's in such disarray. See what I mean? The long knives are out. 14 members of the Kennedy 24 group have resigned since the start of the year, including 12 field staff and 2 main staff, according to multiple sources who, of course, spoke on anonymity. One source close to the campaign pinned the turmoil on 2 leaders. Amaryllis Fox Kennedy, a campaign manager and Kennedy daughter-in-law, and Del Bigtree, an anti-vaccine activist who serves as the campaign's communication director. A major point of contention with the campaign has been the eye-watering payouts to campaign leadership revealed in the FEC report. Enough on Kennedy. I just thought it was interesting as a follow-up from a story that we've had the last 2 days. Okay. Biden had a sort of a press conference yesterday. One of those kind of nice press conferences where he took no questions from the press. Biden says he won't take questions during the White House address. Don't want anything to get in the way of his message. And that message, of course, was basically an anti-Trump speech. I'm not going to be taking any questions, he said yesterday. But I'll be taking questions tomorrow or the next day. But I don't want anything to get in the way of this statement. Biden stuck to the script for roughly 8 minutes, speaking about the Senate passing the $95 billion foreign aid package for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan, and urging House Republicans to pass the bill. He railed against those opposing the bill, saying they're, quote, playing into Putin's hands. He also attacked former President Trump for his recent comments about not protecting NATO allies from Russia if they haven't paid their commitments. This was interesting to me. Biden typically ends his speeches with, may God protect our troops. This time, though, he said, God bless you all. May God protect our speaker. Interesting. I think some veiled, not threat, I don't know what the word is, to just want the speaker to put that bill up for a vote. And I promise I'll come back and answer questions later. Thank you. Wow. Yeah, because if you recall the last time, it did not go that well. That was the press conference where he was trying to kind of ease the pain of that report that from her. And when he went and started speaking, it did not go well. So that ties in with a commercial break. But then when we come back, more on this and what the White House had to say about the president taking a cognitive test. We know that the media was frothing over Trump taking a cognitive test in the early days of his administration. And there's almost, sadly, to show you kind of the mindset, there was disappointment when he passed with flying colors, that the media in some way wanted to see a sitting president not doing well. It was very, well, I think it really showed their true colors. But anyway, so we'll see what the White House has to say about Biden taking cognitive test when we come back. Stay with us. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We've been just receiving so many great comments this morning. This from a viewer. My theory is why the Republicans aren't more forceful is that they want to stay in what can be a lucrative job, and they know the operative wing of the Democrat Party, i.e. the mainstream media, will endlessly work to damage them, see the war on Trump, and possibly get them defeated. And that's a good point. I think there is a part of the Republican Party that really wants to be liked by the media or is scared of the media, whichever way you want to put it. We've seen that historically. I've mentioned on the program numerous times. You recall John McCain always thought that he was a favorite of the media because he very often badmouthed Republicans, and the media loves that. Look at Chris Christie. I mean, again, this is not bias. This is just face value. And then he receives a nomination for president as Republican, and it was within minutes. There was just horrible reports of, did he cheat on his wife? Did he do this? And nothing ever seemed to really be found. The same goes with Mitt Romney. Look at what they actually accuse him of causing somebody or wanting someone to die from cancer, and they brought up he supposedly bullied somebody back in, what was it, like junior high school. But yeah, where does Mitt Romney go when he wants to badmouth Trump? He goes to those same outlets, the CNNs. So I think to this point, there are a lot of Republicans. This is where I would say that there's Democrats like this, so too. Not that they have to worry about the media, but are more worried, obviously, about their job than about maybe fulfilling campaign promises. Hence the reason why, like going back to the point I was bringing up earlier, where the squad can say, we hate issue X, whatever that is. But if the Democrats say, well, we need your vote on it, they're willing to vote, because they don't want to go against the party, and the party will primary you. The party. So listen, everybody, not just in Washington, looking out to keep their job, but in this case, I think there is something there that there's many people in the Republican Party scared of the media, and or wants to be liked by them, whatever person you're thinking of. So Defiant White House says that Biden won't take a cognitive test, despite that report and voters' worries. Boy, that's a red flag, huh? I remember when the media kept calling for it with Trump and finally said, okay, fine, I'll take it, and he passed. This is what the White House said. The president proves every day in how he operates and how he thinks, by dealing with world leaders, by making difficult decisions on behalf of the American people, whether it's domestic or national security. This is how, and then they quoted from Biden's physician, Dr. Kevin O'Connor, this is how Dr. O'Connor sees it, and that is how I'm going to leave it, saying that the president is still very sharp. When we have meetings with him and his staff, he is constantly pushing us, trying to get more information, and so that has been my experience with the president, said the press secretary. Now, what's interesting, though, she can quote Dr. O'Connor, but last year O'Connor did not put Biden through any cognitive tests. The doctor has also never taken questions from the press. This is a clear break of White House president kind of tradition, if you will, or precedent, perhaps. Jean-Pierre asked about finally letting O'Connor take reporters' questions about the oldest ever president's annual physical, which is expected to take place as soon as this month. Refused to commit whether that would occur. Then she maligned her, saying, he's not a medical doctor. He's just not. It's not for him to speak to. It's just not. I don't know. I mean, I would think it would kind of raise red flags. Why wouldn't you want to come out and say, no, see, this her is so-and-so, and here's my test results. But that does not seem to be the case. We got to take another short break. Stay with us. A little bit more on this as we are moving fast this morning. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. Stay with us. Broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. This is Frankly Speaking. I'm your host, Frank Acom. Chuck Schumer says that Biden's mental acuity is, and I quote, great. I talk to President Biden regularly, usually several times in a week. His mental acuity is great. It's fine. It's as good as it's been over the years. Is that a kind of a jaded comment? I don't know how to read that. It's as good as it's been over the years. Well, take that for whatever it's worth. I've been speaking to him for 30 years since we worked on the Brady bill, the assault weapons ban, when I was a young congressman. He's fine. All this right-wing propaganda that his mental acuity has declined is wrong. Never mind what you see during press conferences, during speeches, numerous times through the last however many years. Never mind that. Just like I want you to never mind how much it costs you to get groceries, because everything's just going fine. Rich Lowry says that Joe Biden is the most unfit incumbent president up for re-election since FDR. That's a piece you can find at the New York Post. It goes through kind of the history and the protection of the president and their health. Dan McLaughlin says if Joe Biden is unfit to stand trial, he's unfit to be president. It's that simple. And we had a kind of a similar piece on this right when the Her report broke. If Joe Biden is unfit to stand trial, he's unfit to be president. And what he ends up saying in this piece is a recent ABC News poll found 86% of Americans think Biden is too old to serve another term. 86%. Try getting that many Americans these days to agree on anything. But as Abraham Lincoln is supposed to have said, you cannot fool all the people all the time. Now, we do have to take our last break, and then we're going to wrap things up because I've got a couple comments here. We're going to try to get through as many things as we possibly can. It's going to be breakneck, so stay with us. And we are back with Frankly Speaking. A couple last comments here before we go. This from a viewer. It's interesting that in New York, we can challenge the competency of a driver, but in America, we cannot challenge the competency of the president. Good point. And how about this one? If you're just joining us, the president and the White House has refused to have the president take a cognitive test. Quote, the president takes a cognitive test every time he talks. Thank you for that, viewer. From the New York Post, Kamala Harris's vow that she is ready to serve is a reminder of how much worse she'd be over Biden. Interesting, coming from Michael Goodwin there. You can find that for yourself. That, not the most glowing piece for... Oh, this is interesting. I'm sorry. I'm getting so many comments. It's been such a great morning, and I'm just about out of time. I'm sorry. I'll try to get to as many of them tomorrow as possible, but I believe I just can't read them live sometimes. Get used to it. Biden isn't going anywhere, says an article at Politico, and the idea is that it's conspiracy theory, I should say, that Republicans always seem to think that they're going to drop a candidate out because they're not popular at the last minute. And yet, the whole time he says, the author says that, well, here's a part of a paragraph that basically says, well, it still could happen. Something could happen. But this I do think is a good point. For starters, it's too late to make a switch, they say. I can't go through all these. Biden had his worst week yet. Then Trump made him look competent, says Matt Lewis of the Daily Beast. I'm just giving you all sides, folks. All sides. Nikki Haley rips Trump's RNC moves. We don't have kings in this country. I know I mentioned this yesterday. I was hoping I could get to it today, too. Do you think Haley can come back and be in the GOP, meaning be some type of kingmaker or power player after this, after her run against Trump? I think a lot of that depends on how bad things go in South Carolina. All right, how about this? Democrat Representative Barbara Lee has called for a $50 minimum wage in California. Now you say, Frank, we live in New York. Why do you bring this up? We always like to steal bad ideas in New York from California. Barbara Lee calls for a $50 minimum wage in California, claims that residents just can't get by on $104,000 a year. Also, I might even save this one for tomorrow. I don't want to just ignore this or kind of put it in any kind of different framing here. But there's a steep drop in the number of farms in New York, the new report shows, and they try to make some excuses. It's like the mass exodus in general in New York. It shouldn't come as a surprise. I mean, think of how our farmers have been punished time and time again in the state. In New York, there was a loss of 2,788 farms, including 1,865 dairy farms and 363,885 acres of farmland from 2017 to 2022. It all boils down to the same reasons people are getting out of farming as they are leaving the state. It's as simple as that. We are out of time for today's edition of Frankly Speaking. Thank you for all the comments. Thank you for all the great conversation. We'll be back tomorrow morning, starting at 7 a.m. with Frankly Speaking, only on WYDC TV. Big Fox, keep those comments coming in if you like. We'll try to get to them on tomorrow's broadcast right at the morning. So we'll see you tomorrow.